That pricey bottle of olive oil sitting on your counter? Chances are, about 70% of the time, it hasn't actually come from a single olive. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What follows might completely change the way you look at your fridge. Some of these items are things you've likely eaten countless times, maybe tucked inside a California roll or tossed into a seafood salad at a buffet without even realizing it. It looks like crab. It even has that familiar reddish color, and the package proudly labels it as crab. But here's the catch. There isn't a single piece of real crab in there. What's sold as imitation crab is actually called surimi, a paste made from finely ground white fish. Most often, it's Alaskan pollock combined with starch, sugar, and artificial crab flavoring. The fish is processed so intensely that it loses much of its original omega-3 benefits. That bright red edge? Not natural, just dye, usually carmine or paprika extract, added to make it resemble a real crab shell. Americans consume over 2 billion pounds of this every year. The sodium content alone, sometimes reaching 700 milligrams per serving, is a serious concern for anyone mindful of blood pressure. And if you think that's shocking, fake seafood is only the beginning. Most of the bottles in your pantry? Not a drop of real maple in sight. What you're drizzling over your pancakes is basically corn syrup in disguise, dressed up with a bit of caramel coloring and a splash of artificial maple flavor, and just like that, you've got breakfast syrup. Here's the kicker. Genuine maple syrup runs about $1 an ounce, while the fake stuff costs closer to 10 cents. It's no wonder companies decided to cut corners and create the imposter version. That natural flavor listed on the label? Often it's just fenugreek seeds, a spice that naturally tastes like maple, but at a tiny fraction of the cost. To put it in perspective, Vermont produces around 2 million gallons of real maple syrup each year, but Americans collectively consume over 300 million gallons of syrup. The math doesn't exactly add up, does it? And if you think that's surprising, just wait until you find out what's hiding in your cheese singles. Let's talk about those little individually wrapped orange squares in your fridge. Technically, the FDA won't even allow companies to label them as cheese. Take a closer look at the package. It usually says cheese product or processed cheese food. Why? Because each slice is only about 51% real cheese. The rest is a blend of emulsifiers, milk proteins, and vegetable oils, all mixed together into that perfectly uniform rectangle. This invention goes back to 1916, when James Kraft created it. Not to make something delicious, but to make something that could survive shipping during World War I. Mission accomplished, I suppose. Each slice carries roughly 250 milligrams of sodium, so stacking 3 on a sandwich could eat up a big chunk of your recommended daily limit before lunch even hits. Real cheese, by contrast, ages and develops character over time. These processed singles, they can sit on a shelf for 6 months without changing a bit because the processing killed off anything living inside them. And if you thought cheese was the only dairy imposter hiding in your kitchen, think again. There's more where that came from. Cool Whip is in about 90% of American fridges, but here's the catch. It doesn't contain a single drop of real cream. Turn that tub around and read the ingredients. Water, hydrogenated vegetable oil, high fructose corn syrup. Basically, you're eating sweetened Crisco with a lot of air whipped in. Believe it or not, the original formula had zero dairy until 2010. That's right, none. After decades of complaints, they finally added a bit of skim milk. How generous. Those hydrogenated oils are also why Cool Whip stays fluffy for weeks, while real whipped cream collapses within hours. That's just what cream does. And making actual whipped cream takes less than 90 seconds. Heavy cream, sugar, a whisk, and you're done. But here's the part that really shocks people. The stabilizers in fake whipped topping? Many of the same chemicals are used in industrial lubricants. That bright green paste sitting next to your sushi? It's mostly horseradish with a dash of food coloring. In fact, around 99% of American restaurants serve this imitation rather than the real thing. Here's why. Authentic wasabi root can cost anywhere from $75 to $150 per pound. It only grows in certain Japanese mountain streams where the water temperature is just right, making it extremely difficult to cultivate. The real kicker? Freshly grated wasabi loses its flavor in about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. No restaurant can realistically serve it that quickly. So what's actually in that green blob you're eating? Horseradish, mustard powder, cornstarch, and a bit of spirulina for color. Sure, it'll clear your sinuses, but all the anti-inflammatory and other health benefits of genuine wasabi? Completely missing. Speaking of missing ingredients, you might want to brace yourself for what's really in your blueberry muffin. About those blueberries you think you're eating? Spoiler, you're not. Those tiny blue specks baked into your muffin? Mostly sugar, corn syrup, and dye molded into little berry-shaped pieces. One consumer investigation even found that a popular muffin brand's blueberries contained zero real fruit. Not a single one. Why go through the trouble of faking them? Real blueberries cost roughly 30 times more. Plus, when you bake real berries, they turn brown. Definitely not the picture-perfect blue you expect. The fake ones, on the other hand, stay bright and blue forever, like little immortal sugar nuggets pretending to be healthy. The sneaky part? The label often says natural blueberry flavor, which sounds wholesome, but it doesn't require any actual blueberries. So when Grandma sprinkles these on her oatmeal thinking she's getting antioxidants, what she's really getting is corn syrup and food coloring shaped like hope. Speaking of foods that aren't what they claim to be, let's talk about that green can of Parmesan you shake over your spaghetti. Lab tests have revealed that some brands contain nearly 9% cellulose. That's just wood pulp, the same stuff used to make paper. It's added to keep the cheese from clumping, but here's the kicker. You're paying cheese prices for basically sawdust filler. Authentic Parmigiano Reggiano comes from specific regions in Italy, ages for at least 12 months, and has only 3 ingredients: milk, salt, and rennet. Some pre-grated brands have even been caught mixing in cheaper Swiss or mozzarella while still labeling it as pure Parmesan. The FDA does allow up to 4% cellulose without requiring it to be listed on the front label. My grandmother would have flipped. And those mold inhibitors in pre-grated cans? Completely unnecessary in real aged wheels, which naturally resist spoilage. Speaking of foods that aren't what they claim to be, let's talk about olive oil. That extra virgin bottle sitting in your pantry? There's about a 70% chance it's not telling the truth. Fraud in this industry is so widespread that UC Davis actually set up an entire lab just to detect fake oils. So what's really in the bottle? Often cheap soybean, sunflower, or even hazelnut oils blended together, without a single hint on the label. And it gets worse. Rancid, oxidized oils are chemically deodorized and then slapped with extra virgin stickers. In short, you're paying top dollar for something that's basically gone through witness protection. Here's a quick trick. Real extra virgin olive oil should have a slight bitterness or a peppery kick. If yours tastes completely flat, that's your answer. Italian authorities have seized millions of liters in raids, and organized crime plays a major role in this shady trade. And olive oil? It's far from the only product being laundered this way. Real honey naturally crystallizes over time. That's just part of what makes it honey. But stroll down the grocery aisle, and you'll spot bottles that stay perfectly clear for years. That's your first hint that something's off. More than 75% of honey sold in US stores has been ultra-filtered to remove all pollen. Why does that matter? Because pollen is honey's fingerprint. Without it, there's no way to trace where the honey really came from. This loophole allows imported honey, often from China and sometimes banned due to antibiotic contamination, to slip into American shelves under false labels. It gets worse. Many commercial honeys are also stretched with cheap rice syrup or high-fructose corn syrup. Essentially, you're paying honey prices for corn syrup in a bear-shaped bottle. Meanwhile, honest American beekeepers struggle to compete with these artificially low prices. Speaking of deception, let's talk about cinnamon. That cinnamon you sprinkle on your oatmeal every morning? There's a good chance it's an imposter. Most cinnamon sold in the US is actually cassia, a bark that looks similar to true cinnamon but contains high levels of coumarin, a compound that can harm your liver if you consume it regularly. Real Ceylon cinnamon, the authentic kind, comes in thin, delicate layers. Cassia, by contrast, comes as thick, curled sticks. Here's the shocking part. Cassia can contain up to 1% coumarin, while Ceylon cinnamon has only about 0.004%. That's a 250-fold difference. For seniors sprinkling cinnamon every day in hopes of helping with blood sugar, this isn't a trivial detail. You could unknowingly be exceeding safe limits. To make matters worse, supermarket labels rarely specify which type you're buying. And if you think that's bad, fake cinnamon is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to seafood and other food fraud. Here's a shocking fact about white tuna at sushi restaurants. Most of it isn't actually tuna. DNA testing has revealed something wild. About 74% of fish sold as white tuna is actually escolar, a completely different species. And escolar comes with a nasty surprise. It contains indigestible wax esters. Your body simply can't process them, and the result? Let's just say you'll want to stay very close to a bathroom. The side effects are so infamous that sushi chefs even have a crude nickname for the fish. Japan banned its sale, Italy did the same, yet some American restaurants still serve it as white tuna. Real albacore costs more, So the profit incentive is clear. Seniors and anyone with a sensitive stomach face the biggest risk when they unknowingly order this fish. But mislabeled fish is nothing compared to what's happening with truffle oil. That gourmet drizzle over your pasta? Total fraud. Almost all truffle oils on the market contain zero real truffles. None. The flavor comes from a synthetic compound called 2,4-dithiapentane, a chemical scientists stumbled upon while studying truffle aroma in the lab. It's essentially a petroleum-derived compound that mimics just one tiny aspect of real truffle scent. Authentic truffle-infused oil would cost hundreds of dollars per bottle. So that $12 bottle at your grocery store? Just olive oil with a few drops of lab-made flavor. Celebrity chefs can't stand it. Anthony Bourdain called it one of the most pungent and ridiculous ingredients in modern cooking, and Gordon Ramsay has banned it from his kitchens. In short, you're paying gourmet prices for what's basically chemistry class leftovers. But speaking of deception, wait until you hear what's really going on with your bread. Believe it or not, some loaves in your kitchen might not even qualify as bread. It sounds wild, but in Ireland, Subway actually lost a court case because their loaves contained 5 times the legal sugar limit for bread. The court basically said, that's cake territory, not bread. And it gets even stranger. Many American bread brands use a chemical called azotocarbonamide as a dough conditioner. That's the same compound used in yoga mats. Apparently, our bread needs to be stretchy. Traditional bread? 4 simple ingredients: flour, water, yeast, and salt. That's it. But peek at a typical store-bought loaf, and you'll see 20 or more ingredients, half of which you can't even pronounce. And that healthy whole wheat loaf with its rich brown color? Often just refined white flour dyed with caramel coloring. Speaking of deceptive coloring, let's talk about what's really in your chocolate. That chocolate drizzle on your granola bar? Not actually chocolate. Here's why. The FDA requires real chocolate to contain cocoa butter. But many chocolatey coatings swap it out for palm kernel oil or coconut oil, much cheaper alternatives. How can you tell the difference? Real chocolate melts in your hand. That coating on your favorite snack? It stays oddly solid and almost waxy. And yes, Hershey actually lobbied to allow vegetable fats in products that could still be called chocolate. Bold move. The real kicker. Seniors reaching for dark chocolate for its heart health benefits are often getting nothing. No antioxidants, no flavonoids, just vegetable fat-colored brown. And if you think that's shocking, fake chocolate is only the tip of the iceberg. Wait until you hear what's really in your vanilla. Real vanilla comes from hand-pollinated orchid pods that take months to cure, truly one of the world's most labor-intensive spices. So what do food companies use instead? Often, it's synthetic vanilla made from wood pulp byproducts, and sometimes even petroleum derivatives. That means your vanilla ice cream might owe its flavor to the paper industry. Here's the wild part. Roughly 99% of vanilla-flavored products worldwide contain artificial vanilla. That cookie labeled vanilla probably never touched a single vanilla bean. Madagascar produces about 80% of the world's real vanilla, and when their crops fail, prices can spike higher than the cost of silver per pound. It gets even stranger. Historically, castoreum, a secretion from beaver glands, was used as a natural vanilla flavor. Today, the FDA allows products to claim vanilla-flavored without using any actual vanilla plants. And all that processing? It strips away any of the real vanilla's complex taste. Instant mashed potatoes sound incredibly convenient. No peeling, no boiling, no real cooking at all. Just pour in some hot water and stir. But here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. Those potato flakes are created using a drum drying process at around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, vitamin C and many of the nutrients naturally found in potatoes are destroyed. What remains is mostly starch. And that's basically what you're eating, starch. Afterward, manufacturers mix in ingredients like sodium phosphate, mono and diglycerides, along with preservatives that most people would never think to add to homemade mashed potatoes. A single serving can contain around 400 milligrams of sodium. Compare that to a fresh potato mashed at home, which has none added. Even that creamy, smooth texture isn't coming from butter or cream. Instead, gums and emulsifiers are doing the work to create that familiar consistency. And here's something that really bothers me. These instant potatoes show up constantly in nursing homes and assisted living facilities because they store easily and last forever on the shelf. But honestly, seniors deserve the real thing, actual potatoes, freshly made. Speaking of powdery imposters hiding in your kitchen, let's talk about that white powder you stir into your morning coffee. Despite the name, there's absolutely no cream in it. None at all. Non-dairy creamer is mostly made from corn syrup solids, vegetable oils, and a long list of emulsifiers that sound more like something from a chemistry lab than a breakfast table. Here's the ironic part. Many of these non-dairy products actually contain sodium caseinate, a compound derived from milk. So technically, the non-dairy creamer still has dairy in it. Try to make that make sense. And that bright white color? Often it comes from titanium dioxide, the same substance used in paint and sunscreen. Not exactly what you imagine adding to your coffee. Americans spend more than $1.5 billion every year on this powder. What really raises concerns, though, is one of the additives, dipotassium phosphate. It's included to keep the powder from clumping, but it can interfere with kidney function. For seniors with existing kidney issues, that harmless-looking scoop in their morning coffee could quietly become a health risk. And unfortunately, the long list of additives doesn't end in your coffee cup. That bag of shredded cheese sitting in your fridge? It's actually coated in something very similar to sawdust. Technically, it's called cellulose powder, the same plant fiber used in making paper. In many cases, up to 4% of what you're buying isn't cheese at all. It's wood pulp added simply to keep the shreds from sticking together. And that's exactly why your quesadillas or grilled cheese never melt the way you expect. Those anti-clumping additives create a thin barrier around the shreds, which prevents them from melting smoothly. Freshly grated cheese, on the other hand, turns rich and creamy much faster. The pre-shredded kind often just sits there, barely melting and looking a little disappointing. There's also another ingredient mixed in, natamycin, an antifungal antibiotic used to stop mold from forming. Some researchers have raised concerns that it could interfere with the balance of bacteria in your gut. So in the end, you're often paying about 30% more for a product that contains less real cheese, melts worse, and includes extra additives you probably didn't ask for. And cheese, as it turns out, isn't the only food hiding secret ingredients. Those crunchy bacon bits sprinkled on top of your salad? There's a good chance they contain absolutely no pork. Check the ones sitting in your pantry right now. Most of them don't include a single shred of real bacon. Instead, they're made from textured soy flour that's dyed reddish and coated with artificial smoke flavor. In other words, they're basically flavored protein pellets pretending to be bacon. There's an easy clue too. Real bacon would spoil within a few days if left out at room temperature. These little bits, though, can sit on a shelf for up to 2 years without any problem. That smoky taste usually comes from liquid smoke or synthetic flavor compounds, while the color is created using caramel coloring and red dye. And here's the frustrating part. Salad bars in many restaurants use these all the time without mentioning it. So if you've been avoiding soy for health reasons, there's a good chance you've still been eating it, sprinkled over every Caesar salad you thought was harmless. But honestly, fake bacon bits are minor compared to what's happening with real meat. Chicken nuggets seem harmless enough. You picture small chunks of chicken, breaded and cooked, right? Well, not exactly. Many nuggets are made with something called mechanically separated chicken. That's an industry term for a paste created by forcing leftover chicken carcasses through metal screens under intense pressure. What goes through those machines? Pretty much everything that remains after the prime cuts are removed. Tiny bone fragments, skin, bits of cartilage, and leftover tissue. It all gets ground together into a smooth mixture. After that, manufacturers add binders like sodium phosphate and modified food starch. These ingredients help hold the mixture together so it can be shaped into something that actually resembles food. Here's the surprising part. In some products, only about 40% of the nugget is real chicken meat. The rest is batter, fillers, and a long list of additives. And even when the label proudly says white meat chicken, that phrase can legally include almost any chicken material that's been processed into a pale-colored paste. Speaking of questionable ingredients, wait until you hear what's actually hiding inside your strawberry yogurt. That fruity yogurt in your fridge might not have much connection to real strawberries at all. In many cases, the sugar content outweighs the amount of actual fruit. And that soft pink color you see? It often comes from carmine, a dye made from crushed beetles. Yes, insects are literally responsible for giving your breakfast that rosy tint. As for the strawberry flavor itself, it's frequently created using synthetic compounds such as ethyl methylphenylglycidate, a chemical designed to imitate the taste of strawberries without using the fruit. Even those fruit on the bottom cups aren't what they seem. The strawberry layer is usually a mixture dominated by corn syrup, with only a few small pieces of fruit floating around. In many cases, real strawberries make up just 3 to 4% of the total weight. Everything else is filler. And here's the part that really stands out. Many seniors buy yogurt hoping to support gut health with probiotics, yet the product they're eating often contains more additives and sweeteners than beneficial cultures. Speaking of foods that aren't quite what they claim to be, processed guacamole takes the idea of deception to a whole new level. You might grab that bright green tub at the store thinking you're choosing something healthy. But here's the surprising part. Some brands contain less than 2% actual avocado. Just 2%. So what makes up the rest? Often it's a mix of vegetable oils, modified food starch, and green coloring designed to imitate the look of freshly mashed avocado. In one case, a major brand was even sued after consumers discovered the guacamole was largely made from skim milk and coconut oil. Real avocados naturally turn brown fairly quickly once they're cut. That's just how the fruit behaves. So, when a container of guacamole sits in your fridge for weeks while staying perfectly green, that's a clear sign something else is going on. Manufacturers typically rely on preservatives and stabilizers to keep that bright color intact. And here's the part that really matters. Most people buy guacamole for its healthy monounsaturated fats, the kind doctors often recommend for heart health. But if the product contains mostly cheap vegetable oils instead of avocado, those benefits disappear. Speaking of deceptive coloring, let's take a look at what's really behind the dark color of your cola. That deep brown shade isn't part of some mysterious secret recipe. It comes from a chemical compound known as 4-methylimidazole. In fact, the state of California has required cancer warnings on products containing high levels of it. This compound forms during the production of certain caramel colorings, when manufacturers heat sugar together with ammonia under intense pressure and high temperatures. Not exactly the most appetizing process. Here's the surprising part. Caramel coloring doesn't actually contribute any flavor at all. Zero. Its entire purpose is cosmetic, to make foods look richer and more appealing. That same brown tint appears in products like soda, soy sauce, and even barbecue-flavored chips. On average, Americans consume around 13 micrograms of this compound every day through processed foods. The caramel coloring industry itself is enormous, easily the most widely used food dye in the world. Billions of products rely on it, all because we've come to expect certain foods to look a very specific way. But while we're on the topic of liquid deception, let's talk about that fruity drink sitting in your fridge. If you're reaching for cranberry juice thinking it's a healthy choice, you might be in for a surprise. Products labeled fruit juice cocktail or fruit drink can legally contain as little as 10% real juice. So what fills the other 90%? Usually it's a mix of water, high fructose corn syrup, and citric acid doing most of the work. Cranberry juice cocktail isn't much better. It typically contains only about 27% actual cranberry juice. The remaining 73% is essentially sweetened water dressed up with fruit imagery on the label. And here's the part that really stands out. A single glass can contain as much sugar as a candy bar. Yet you'll still find it sitting comfortably in the healthy beverages section of the store. That phrase, made with real fruit juice, might sound reassuring, but it can still be technically true even when the juice represents only a tiny portion of the drink. And unfortunately, juice isn't the only product pretending to be healthier than it really is. Margarine actually started as a budget substitute for butter, originally created to feed Napoleon's troops. And the first version, it was made from beef fat. Not exactly appetizing. Later on, manufacturers switched the formula to hydrogenated vegetable oils. For many years, doctors even recommended margarine as the healthier alternative to butter. But eventually, researchers discovered the truth. Those trans fats in hydrogenated oils were actually worse for your heart than butter itself. Here's the part that really stands out. Many spreads today advertise things like made with olive oil or made with real butter. But if you read the ingredient list carefully, those fancy additions are usually buried near the bottom. In other words, they're present in tiny amounts, more marketing than substance. Without added coloring, margarine wouldn't even resemble butter. Naturally, it's more of a pale gray or off-white. That's why manufacturers add beta-carotene to give it that familiar yellow tone. And those so-called buttery spreads? Water is often the first ingredient listed. So in many cases, you're paying butter-level prices for what's basically flavored water blended with processed oils. But fake grill marks might be the sneakiest visual trick in your freezer. Those perfect, evenly spaced char lines on your frozen burger? Many of them are completely painted on. I'm serious. Food manufacturers often use caramel coloring or edible ink to create the illusion of grill marks because actually grilling every patty during mass production would be far too expensive. Some brands stamp the raw meat with heated branding plates, while others simply spray on the lines. Here's what's really striking. Real grill marks aren't just cosmetic. They're evidence of the Maillard reaction, the chemical process that actually creates flavor. Painted on lines? Pure theater. And the kicker? The FDA doesn't require companies to disclose it. None. Food producers know we're hardwired to respond to those char lines. Studies show that we instinctively assume grill-marked food tastes better. It's arguably one of the most effective visual tricks in the entire frozen food aisle. Speaking of things that aren't what they seem, your vitamin water has a secret too. It sounds healthy, right? The name literally says vitamin. But here's the kicker. Coca-Cola, the company behind it, actually argued in court that no reasonable consumer would expect the drink to be healthy. That was their legal defense. And honestly, they had a point. A single bottle often contains around 32 grams of sugar, almost as much as a can of soda. The vitamins added are cheap synthetic isolates that your body barely absorbs. Those natural flavors in fancy flavored waters? Usually just processed compounds with zero real fruit involved. And the term enhanced water? Legally, it doesn't mean anything. No regulations, no standards, just marketing. Many seniors drink these beverages instead of plain water, thinking they're getting meaningful nutrition, when in reality, it's mostly sugar and synthetic additives. Speaking of misleading labels, let's dig into what's really in your deli meat. That neatly sliced turkey breast from the counter? In many cases, it's not a whole piece of meat at all. Instead, it's turkey that's been dissolved in a brine, reformed into a loaf, and then thinly sliced to look natural. Basically, Frankenstein's lunch meat. Manufacturers often inject it with carrageenan or other fillers to add weight, meaning you're paying turkey prices for something that's mostly seasoned water. Honey ham is another sneaky example. Most of the time, it contains almost no real honey. The sweetness comes from corn syrup. And that oven-roasted label? Many of these products never saw an oven. The flavor usually comes from liquid smoke sprayed on during processing. 2 ounces of deli turkey can pack over 500 milligrams of sodium. That's nearly a quarter of your recommended daily limit before you even add mustard. But honestly, sodium might be the least concerning additive lurking in your sandwich. Protein supplements are a huge industry, and seniors are often prime targets. Here's the trick many companies use. Some powders are spiked with cheap amino acids like taurine or glycine. Why? Because lab tests measure total nitrogen to calculate protein content. These amino acids inflate the numbers without actually providing the high-quality protein your muscles need. So when a label promises 30 grams of protein, you might only be getting 20 grams of real protein, with the rest made up of fillers that artificially boost the number. Meal replacement shakes aren't much better. Many of them pack most of their calories from corn or maltodextrin, a fancy name for starch that spikes your blood sugar almost like candy. And if you see superfood on the label, that's basically meaningless. There's no legal definition, no standard, nothing. It's just marketing designed to make you feel like you're making a healthy choice. Speaking of paying for something that isn't what it seems, your bottled water has a secret too. Here's the truth. Around 64% of bottled water sold in the US actually comes from municipal tap water. That's right, filtered, repackaged, and sold back to you at a huge markup. Brands like Aquafina and Dasani aren't sourced from mountain springs or glaciers. They're basically your kitchen faucet in a fancy bottle. Here's the kicker. Tap water is tested hundreds of times every month. Bottled water? Far less oversight. And then there's the microplastics issue. Studies have found more than 300 tiny plastic particles per liter in some brands, meaning you're literally drinking bits of the bottle itself. Americans spend roughly $16 billion a year on bottled water. $16 billion for water that's often identical to what's coming out of your tap. So next time you grab that premium bottle, just remember, your faucet might actually be the better option.